my question then also is to Mitch, and I wanted to ask a couple of things for county, and that is, there's mention in here of the hillside design guidelines. Is the county working on anything to protect the ridge lines from building right on top of the ridge lines, and the guidelines that exist now that are advisory, is there any movement toward making those more regulatory?
Yes, Commissioner. First, on the ridge lines, the county has designated ridge lines within the Castaic Community Standards District, which is generally in the northwestern portion of the planning area. We're currently mapping ridge lines for the remainder of the planning area. We expect that map to be complete before the plan goes to public hearing. With regard to updating the hillside standards, we're committed to working with the city to develop consistent hillside regulations, and also to take many of the guidelines and to put them into the code and to make them mandatory. Again, our goal is to complete that effort before it comes for public hearing.
Okay, and Mitch, I'll just grab you one more minute here. Hopefully coming up too in your circulation element, it would be helpful for us to be able to see arterials, roadways, so that people can get through our area here without cutting through residential neighborhoods. You know that there was a neighborhood meeting in North Saugus recently, and there was talk about another subdivision where they wanted to build more than 500 units in an area that's, I think, maybe 126 units could be built. You know, at least tripling, if not quadrupling that. So, and the discussion principally was about people cutting through neighborhoods, and we've had so many of those problems come before us. So, it would be so beneficial if we could hear more about that when the county circulation element, when we discuss that here. Thank you. I think that we need to consider larger buffers and more wildlife corridors to support diverse wildlife, if that's one of our goals. And, you know, I love the statement recognizing that most Americans cannot live in the same community throughout their lives and grow old with their friends. That's a good start. But again, we need to look at senior housing, low-income senior housing and workforce housing. And I know that that's probably going to come up, and I'm looking forward to that discussion next Tuesday. But we also need to look at putting amenities in locations where seniors can walk to them, rather than putting seniors in areas where they're essentially warehoused. I don't know about school districts that are using year-round schedules. Is there? I thought Newhall School District was the last one doing that. So.
Right. We've received some updated information there. There's a shortened summer, but not an official year-round schedule.
Okay. It was a big deal to parents, so I remember that quite well. And hospital, you know, we're talking about health provisions. I think we need to be working with the county too about creating a facility for military veterans and others. Another hospital is definitely needed, and I think that should be something we're going out to, because to me, that's also part of economic development. Now, and you said that FEMA's adjusting, so that will be answered later. But in terms of the support of commercial and institutional uses, will that come before the Planning Commission for reviews and zone changes? Because I know you said you're trying to stay away from general plan amendments and zone changes, but.
Right. We've identified that if someone wanted to do a neighborhood activity center, it would require a conditional use permit, which would be a public hearing before the Planning Commission.
Some businesses that manufacture and assemble products and goods may require outdoor workspaces, if not storage. So have you discussed that with Chamber of Commerce, or is there any consideration for those types of businesses? I don't see any place where they can really operate. Okay.
I've not had that dialogue yet.
All right. And considerations for promoting creation of an expansion of small businesses. You know, we've already created some live workspaces with another project that was approved, but I'd like to know if we've got anything else coming down the line for that. Again, a greater development setback for habitat and species protection. And, I think, too, this goes back to something that I've mentioned before in other sessions about redevelopment and re-landscaping. And if we're going to talk about pavers and talk about permeable surfaces, we need to develop policies for encouraging residential and commercial changes that will encourage water conservation and improve water quality. And I would like to add a policy, I'm going to use the word innovative, but encouraging innovative site design to protect oak trees and other trees and to preserve hillsides and habitats. I think a lot of times we do a good job with that, but I think that their developments could do better in some of these areas. Mentioned safety around schools, and let me just see if there was something else. You know what, let me look at these notes, and if you want to ask others and then come back.
That'd be great.
That'd be great, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Troutman. Commissioner Kennedy.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief in view of the time. But first, let me say that I'm pleased with the cooperation that we've seen in this plan. I think we can all rejoice by the fact that there was close cooperation between the county and the city here. And I hope this burgeoning contact is something that's going to develop into something even more going forward, because I think it's essential that we do the planning in concert. I like several of the broad notions in this plan. And I think the staff has done a great job on that, such as a conservation of open space, which is one of the hallmarks of our great community here. I like the fact that we're going to preserve community character, albeit we heard some comments tonight, especially from Clarita Canyon, that maybe we need to do a little bit more work there. But I think in general, this plan does preserve the community character of our valley of villages here, if you will. And I like that. I'm in favor of that. I like the mixed-use development here. I like the transit-oriented development that is proposed in here. And I like the fact that we're trying to develop walkable communities within this valley, which is all good, I think. But I also like the suggestion by Mr. Alan Cameron of the overlay, of the changes to show that. Another thing that I think that might be useful when looking at that overlay is when we get into this dichotomy, if you will, of build-up versus rural area. How do we combine urban and rural? Maybe we should look at the notion of how do we feather the edges between the two, so that there's not a stark boundary line, but rather there's a gradient of change from the dense area, urban areas into the rural areas. And if we had an overlay like that, that might show us areas that could use a little bit of blending, perhaps, to make it more palatable to everybody. In the plan, we talk about health and safety and welfare, which is all good. We talked about dangerous locations and noise and flood hazard zones. I think it would be useful perhaps to add some others. What I would suggest is utility easements, for example, especially gas and transmission lines that could be hazardous, and we may want to limit the construction around those in sites. I think we ought to look at bridges and our vulnerabilities there in view of the fact we're in an earthquake country. And if bridges come down, who are we going to trap and where might we want to limit development, just because if the key bridge goes down, there may not be a safe egress out of that area. Things of that nature. Rail lines is another hazardous item that I think we should look at in the context of the construction of building. I agree with Commissioner Troutman, and we need the right mix of housing in order to have a sustainable community, and hopefully we're going to see that in the housing element when we look at how much housing is provided for seniors, for affordable workforce housing, and other elements like that, and I'll be looking for it there. The parks issue is a good one that came up, which is that it would be nice to see certain areas identified in parks here. I'd like to go a step further, too, and propose that I've heard the notion talked about of a tree bank, and that is an area where a developer who is going to have to remove oak trees to put through an approved project can plant trees elsewhere off his own property if there isn't sufficient room there to come up with some mitigations to counter the oak. If we already had designated green spots on this map and said those are tree banks where they could be grown, maybe Whitaker Burmite is a place, maybe places for future parks that we're considering would be a good use for that. I don't know. Page LTAS 21, we talked about the various jobs and things that are coming into the community. There's 3 of them, and I know from an economic development perspective, it's probably where this came from, but we're focusing on film production, biotech, and tourism. I'd like to add for consideration aerospace. I think we already have the nucleus for good aerospace development here from an economic development perspective, and we can play on the great heritage of having had the Lockheed Skunk Works here. And aerospace is a good one, especially if it's defense-related, but I'll throw that out for consideration. I also like the ridge line thing with regard to Castaic. My initial reaction when I started reading this plan was, well, why not other areas? But then when I got to the end of the plan on L73, I see that the county has committed to looking at developing in concert with our city ridgeline guidelines for the other areas, and I'm glad to hear tonight that that's going to be done before we have the public hearing on this final plan. I think that's fantastic. I really, really am emboldened and encouraged by this cooperation between the city and the county. This really is a unique general plan in that regard, and thank you for working together. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Kennedy. Commissioner Burkhart?
Yeah, real quick. It would be great if we could just roll out this map and the city could tell everybody what we were going to build and where we were going to build it. Unfortunately, we've got the notion of all these people that own their property, and I think what has happened here through this process is we've come a long way in nudging the people who own the property and nudging the developers and giving enough incentive to get them to want to do the things that the community feels ought to be done in a certain area. I know that has been kind of a goal of the city through different plans and projects and proposals over the years to allow the incentives and that gentle nudge of it'd be a lot easier for you as a developer to put this type of project in this area. That said, I guess the only question I have right now of the land use is, and I don't know if you can even answer it specifically, so I'll just take a real broad swipe answer if you have it. How much actual zone changes are we looking at on this land use map compared to our current land use map? A significant sweep, very little?
You know, I think that's really in the eye of the beholder. I mean, it would be disingenuous of me to say there aren't significant changes. I mean, we definitely have an increase in specific plan zoning designations. We've have a number of properties that way. We've have more lower density residential uses in the outlying areas of the valley. We've added mixed use zoning, which doesn't exist. We have an overlay now, but which didn't exist with our previous general plan. So, I mean, I think it's fair to say that there are some significant changes. You know, maybe the overlay map might be an opportunity to see where some areas stick out over others. I'll tell you, kind of the existing residential core of the valley is minimally changed, though. I think those residential zonings and densities have stayed the same. Where you see the changes are specific plans, mixed use, and our outlying residential areas.
Okay. I don't think there's a wrong answer to the question, by the way. I think that if we had minimal change, there's positive to that, and if we have a lot of change, there's positive to that. I'm a little bit concerned about, people's zoning on their property being changed so that they feel that there's been a significant economic removal from what they own and the challenges that would present. But also at the same time, that is somewhat necessary if we're going to nudge these things the way that we want them to go. So that's about the answer I was looking for at this point. And I agree that overlay. Alan, I've known you a long time. Smartest thing I ever heard you say. I think that would be a great help in everybody understanding this process and what we're getting accomplished here.
Thank you, Commissioner Burkhart. Commissioner Ostrom.
Yeah, I think one thing I learned here tonight was that coming into it, I really knew that I couldn't put my arms around this particular topic. This topic is really where the rubber hits the road, and you can tell just by the turnout we've had tonight relative to the other topics. And then with the comments that I got from some of the speakers, there were other issues I hadn't even given the weight that I give them now. I think my concern is that there's no one arguing with the goals, and it's just like in my own family situation. You know, we all want to. If you're taking vacation, you want to have a good time. It's all in how you're going to get there. And if you're going to go to New York, are you going to fly? Are you going to drive? Are you going to pedal your bicycle? You're going to go by motorcycle? There's many, many ways in which to accomplish the objective. And the problem is that maybe a lot of people think, and I'm probably one of them, think that their way is the best. There's got to be a lot of this communication, understanding, the idea that Placerita Canyon and Sand Canyon are going to somehow be handled differently. I mean, that just really hit me broadside. There's just that to me, that's unfathomable. I don't think that anyone thinks that, but from what people have read, they come to that conclusion. So we need to really understand that. I think what I'm saying is that there's got to be more dialogue. I think this is the only work session that we have on this, and then we're going to be at a hearing. And I'm a little bit frustrated in anticipation of the feeling I'm going to have when we're going to be at the hearing, that I still don't have my hands around this, because the goals are pretty obvious, but how you achieve the goals in the parlance of planning, to me, isn't terribly obvious. We're going to be looking at this matrix. In fact, that's one of the things I had. I have how many changes, lists of changes, and things like that, because that way I can at least see what my house is going to be like, and what people's property who may ask me what's going to impact them. And I think that everyone that owns property, that's the first thing that pops into their head. But from the greater goals, from the actual goals that we want to achieve, how are these changes going to accomplish that? Now, in an EIR, typically what we do is we have 5 options. Let's not change the general plan. And then there's the one that is being proposed, and then there's some other options by varying different parameters. I wonder if is there a good analogy here? Is there some way that we can take a look at arriving at our goals, or sensitizing ourselves to goals by changing some of the major planning parameters, like the amount of zoning, or the zoning in certain locations, or because I think what we're going to be looking at is do we approve of the zoning changes, and how do they get us where we want to go? And it's not very clear in my mind that I really understand right now how these proposals are going to get us really where we want to go. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Ostrom. At this time, I'd like to bring up, if I could, the Director of the Planning, Paul Brotzman.
I wanted to just make a couple real brief comments that I think may be helpful in the process. One thing to keep in mind for both, and I'm sure the Commission's fully aware of this, but the community may not be, and that is that this is a general plan. So by nature, it's general. Probably we've done a lot more work in terms of developing specificity in this plan than many general plans, but it still is a general plan. It has broad goals, it has objectives, it has basic guidelines that we will move toward implementation. But we will not fully implement this general plan the day it's adopted. There's going to be a lot of work that the general plan calls for us to continue to do. We're going to be continuing to look at developing conservation guidelines. We're going to be continuing to look at energy requirements and so on. So the general plan adoption as we go through the process is not the end of the process. I think it's important to note that we have in the city special standards districts, and we encourage them and support them, and we want to continue to encourage them and support them. And in fact, there are maybe areas in the city where we don't have special standards districts that we could and should have, and it will be important for some parts of the community to come together to work with the staff, the commission, the council to develop special standards. I think it's important for areas where there are special standards districts to look at them and to come back to us and talk to the city for a dialogue to exist between the residents and the community to look at potentially enhancing them. Because I've heard, for example, things attributed to the Clarita Canyon special standards districts that they don't do. And so there may be ways that we should look at them and strengthen them. Because I think there are expectations that they accomplish things that may, in fact, not truly be accomplished under those standards, and perhaps we should be looking at those and working additional elements into them. One of the comments I wanted to make regarding the transportation analysis zones, we use those as a tool to really probably do the most careful analysis of what the population potential and the development potential of this map could be. If we took the straight zoning suggests that the valley could develop to over 500,000 people. But we know that that won't happen because there will be, in fact, hillside standards. There will be limitations that exist within areas that will limit the amount of development that will occur. So we tried to do the most careful, thorough analysis that I think has ever been done in terms of what potentially could develop in the valley, not necessarily what will develop in the valley. So we've looked at that and we've tried to factor that into this. One of the comments that I would also make is that there, and I heard this coming from Commissioner Burkhardt, the issue of zoning changes. If we downzone some property, what are we affecting property rights? I heard a comment about designating more park space. Well, it's hard to designate park space that doesn't currently exist on a map and say this land will be park space and that's all that can be done to it. Because if we do that, that's essentially a taking. We've essentially told somebody that the city is going to take that land and pay for it and make it a park. And so we have to be careful. We have to identify the standards of how much park space we want, and then as areas develop, we incorporate that into the plans for the development in those areas. So that's all of the going forward process, and there's a lot of it. There will be a lot of work yet to be done, but and I do want to comment on the relationship that's been commented on before between the city and the county. I think it's probably been, this has been one of the most productive experiences that has happened between the city and the county. It's a very, very positive relationship. The city and the county will be working closely in developing implementation standards as we go forward. And I'm very pleased and gratified by the nature of the relationship that we've been able to develop with the county and hope to build on it as we continue to go forward into the future.
Thank you so much for your comments, Mr. Brotzman. Folks, I want to thank you so much for your input tonight. I would encourage you to send letters and emails to Jason Smisko. Sorry to overload you, but I think it's important if you do this because anything that's sent to him is passed through to us. And then, you know, that helps us make our decisions and keeps him on the ball, too. So go ahead and do that. We do appreciate all your input tonight.
Mr. Chair,
yeah,
could I make just a couple of other comments?
You can do anything you want.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to quickly ask if it's possible, since Commissioner Ostrom mentioned it, and wanting to have more opportunity to get his head around it, and I think it would be beneficial for the community if we could consider doing charrettes, even evening charrettes with the public after this input is in on major elements, at least the housing element, the land use and circulation, so that the public can see how it's been refined and can make some further suggestions, since it sounds like this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get a dialogue, and we're trying to make sure that everybody's clear and that we hear everything too. And there may be things that we've not considered and we haven't heard in the 1-minute speeches this evening. And I just want to say that, you know, smart growth, I think the way that the city's trying to approach it is the right way in the main, but it's not about making mass change and just rolling it over everything that exists. And that's something that I heard tonight, too, about making sure from Bill that there's a gradient of change, that we're considering what's happening in the immediate neighborhoods and we're protecting those areas as we've promised to do. And it is true, Paul, what you mentioned, too, about having additional standards districts. There are Newhall's considering that, and that's something we had mentioned in a previous meeting about development that was going on there. So thank you. Thank you very much, Jason. Good job, and thank you all.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell-Glaze, we want to thank you for coming tonight and everything. And Jason, you and your entire staff, thank you very much for the hard work. Yes, sir.
Just one more concluding comment. I do want to I quickly mentioned this in the presentation. We will have another round of workshops, most likely in October. We'll have 3 different workshops, east, west, and center of the valley, and that'll be a great opportunity for us to accomplish and transmit many of your comments that were made tonight and illustrate how those will be part of the proposed One Valley, One Vision document.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Any other comments before we adjourn? No? Someone like to make a motion?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All right. Meeting adjourned.
Hey, Mike, give me another one.
The cost of one more drink, $4.50. The cost of a DUI, severe fines and loss of freedom. Causing innocent loss of life, unimaginable. The value of acting responsibly?
On second thought, why don't you call me a cab?
Priceless. Drinking and driving are not worth the cost. Call a friend or taxi to get home safely.
Summertime means good times with the City of Santa Clarita's Concerts in the Park series. Come out to Central Park each Saturday at 7 p.m. for a great lineup of music, including Queen Nation, Hollywood U2, The Craze, and a whole lot more. Family, fun, and entertainment all summer long at Central Park. Check out the full lineup online at santa-clarita.com and don't miss the Concerts in the Park series. This message is sponsored by Time Warner Cable.